Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Co-Star, the official newspaper of the Borough of Belmar, and the Asbury Park Press on December 4th, 2019, and notice of this meeting was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building.
Thank you, April. If everybody could join me in saluting the flag of our great nation. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody just remain standing for a moment of silence for our troops, their families, and all our first responders. Thank you. Bob, you ready? You the first? We have Bob Allison, our auditor, here. He's going to be first up on the workshop agenda. He wants to go over some of the issues that we have with our water. Yeah, well, good. Okay, the Mayor's Council asked me to come here tonight. We're in the process of putting together the 2020 budget. If you were here last year when we had a talk about the entire town, one of the thoughts was, or one of the things that we talked about was that aside from our taxes, which we experienced last year, that our water and sewer utility was going to have some problems going forward because, again, our debt service was going to grow based on previously operating off temporary debt and having to do now permanent debt. So what I've shown here is a few years of activity. This is 2017, 2018, which are audited numbers. 2019 is not audited yet, but they're good numbers, and this is a 2020 preliminary. So you can see in 2017, we actually made $69,000 that year. We had $1 million in surplus. We ended up with a little more than $1 million at the end of 17. We go into 18, because our costs are growing, especially in debt service, we lost $224,000. Our surplus went from a little over $1 million to about $850,000. 2019, the loss is growing. We lost $436,000. We had a remainder of $853,000. Surplus, we're down at $416,000. So now we're coming into 2020. We have $450,000 in our surplus. Our revenues, we can't anticipate revenues that are greater than the prior year. So last year we collected $3,005,000 in water rents, and $3,005,000 is what we have to budget now unless there is some known increase. Same thing with miscellaneous revenue, that we have some knowledge of. So miscellaneous revenue that we know about that we can budget is about the $280,000. And then these are our expenses that has come out of the finance office as to what our budget is. See, our debt service again has grown. I put percentages here because except for that 27%, the rest of it is uncontrollable. 39% is the money that gets paid to SMRSA for water treatment. We get a bill from them, we pay it. We don't have any choice into where we have our sewer treated. Same thing with purchase of water, Social Security and pension costs, capital improvement, that's for the yearly maintenance of just repairing things, and having repairs to the system, kind of similar to debt service, except we don't finance it, we just pay it. So without any other revenue enhancements, preliminary budget is we're gonna lose $682,000. We only have 416 in surplus. We have a deficit of 265,000. So right now, we have a budget that cannot balance, state one accepted. So we are now in the process of looking at alternatives as to what we can do. The Mayor Council may speak to this. We have new things coming online during the year. We can't budget for it because we can't predict it. But we do need something to plug the hole, at least for this year. And over the next week or so, we're going to be talking about that. So, pretty simple. Any questions on that? It's just a steep cliff that we're going off. 250,000 a year we're losing. On top of it, on top of itself. Our expenses keep going up, revenues can't go up. We have 3,000 users. We can't say, well, next year we're going to have 6,000. We're not. We have 3,000 users. Thereabouts. The last rate increase looks like, I think the last rate increase happened in 2014, so it's been about 6 years. And I think that balanced for then. But then, again, costs have gone up, especially in capital improvements and debt service, which are repairs and enhancements and improvements to the system. That's it.
Any council members have any questions?
Never good news. Thank God. Yeah. Krista, you need this screen, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just one thing that we're looking at with the water, we've been looking at it all week to try to figure out what we're going to do. We're looking at tiering all the water rates so that the users that use the least will not be changed, and then the users that use the most amount of water will pick up the difference. So we're looking at all different scenarios to try to make up that the deficit that we have. So we're working with our auditors and Christine, our CFO, and hopefully by next week we might have to have a special meeting on it. But, so, anybody else have any questions on that before we move on? All right. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Christine. All right. Next up, Kristen.
Good evening, everybody. Mayor and Council. My name is Ed Lippincott. I'm the Chair of the Belmar Environmental Commission. Go ahead, Kristen. Last year, Belmar Environmental Commission worked very hard. We came up with a series of recommendations for the Mayor and Council, which I emailed the other day to Administrator Kirschenbaum, and he forwarded it all to the Mayor and Council for your consideration. One of the main things that we worked on for the entire year was updating the environmental resource inventory, which was done in 2010. We felt it was necessary to update it regarding most of the changes that have happened in Belmar since Hurricane Sandy, which are pretty substantial for anybody who sat through that. Krista knows very first-hand knowledge of the effects of Hurricane Sandy. She works with the New Jersey Organizing Project, which is a nonprofit that formed after Sandy that helps people get back into their homes. They have a PowerPoint presentation they do that talks about changes to the federal flood insurance program, how it's going to affect homeowners and residents. And we presented it previously at the Taylor Pavilion. Some of you may have been there, but it's a work in progress. So we have this for you tonight for your consideration. So I'll give you Krista Sperber.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, right?
You'll have to use the screen. She can see the screen up there. There we go.
Okay, so I'm a forest expert on flood insurance. In the wake of Sandy, as you know, Belmar was inundated. My family had more than enough flood insurance to get through, but we found ourselves on a really unlevel playing field, one that was tilted towards the insurance companies and against us. And it was through this fight that, again, I had to become a forest expert on the flood insurance program. There are significant changes that are going to be implemented. They were originally set to roll out in April 1st of 2020, and that has since been delayed. So we do have a little bit of time, but all the information is pertinent. And again, it is a living, breathing document, this presentation. There's constantly changes being made. And in fact, I had to add a few more slides today based on those changes. So, let's get started. Okay, National Flood Insurance Program. The first thing that we find that we have to talk about is the narrative that it's really just coastal elites that the flood insurance program is for. And that is actually completely inaccurate. This is something that was developed in the 60s because of chronic inundation and flooding along the Mississippi River. Private flood insurance was not available, and so this public program, this National Flood Insurance Protection, I'm going to call this the NFIP, that's what I'll be talking about, and that's when it was developed. This is a taxpayer-funded program, and it belongs to the citizens of the United States. How many people think it was just like a coastal thing, right? Most people do. So what happened? Well, in the 80s, under the Reagan administration, the NFIP became a public-private partnership, which allowed private insurance companies to administer policies under the NFIP. So this is still under the National Flood Insurance Program, but now private insurance companies write policies, and they get 30 cents on the dollar for every policy just to administer the program. So you can see that there was 120 insurers who wrote private flood insurance in 2018, and that was up from 90 in 2017 and 50 in 2016. Why do you think the write your owns want in? Follow the money. How do you think that worked out? Okay, so insurance companies profited $400 million after Sandy. There's several good documentaries here if you're interested. One was a 60 Minutes story called The Storm After the Storm. The other is NPR Frontline, The Business of Disaster. And you'll see, you know, again, follow the money. Why do the write your owns want in? One of the key problems with write your owns is something that I faced, and that in the appeals, these write your own insurance companies side with the insurer 93% of the time, and only 7% of the time do they side with the homeowner. So, FEMA and NFIP are looking to roll out Flood Risk 2.0. It was set to roll out April of 2020. There were so many unanswered questions. We put a lot of pressure on the agency, and just a little side note, just to amend what Ed had said, that this grassroots organization I helped found in the wake of Sandy, we focus on working at the legislative level. We're not an advocacy group trying to get individual homeowners home, but we're trying to change laws that get everybody home and make sure that everything is a full and fair recovery. Okay, so the plan is to use data to determine actuarial rates, whereas now we have a pooled risk rate. And so I'm going to get into more of what actuarial rates look like. But what happens is they're going to look at distance closest to the water source. For us in Belmar, we have water on 3 sides. That's not good. Cost to rebuild the structure under current rates, and rates that are in line with New Jersey rebuilding. So whereas post-Sandy we might have had rebuilding costs that were reflective of rebuilding in New Orleans wasn't necessarily accurate to New Jersey. So it wasn't enough money to rebuild. And the type of flood risk, whether it's storm surge, river overflow, or just heavy rains. Okay, risk rating 2.0 will initially provide credits for mitigation actions. So that's flood openings in homes and elevating out of posts and piles. This is my house on 8th Avenue. We chose to fill in the basement. We no longer have to worry about a sump pump. We're just up on piers. The water can come, the water can go. We're out of the way. Also elevating machinery and equipment above the lowest floor. So that's getting your heat, your hot water, electric, everything above the floodplain. All right. So if we look at, I don't believe in Belmar we have anybody in the velocity zone. I think everything is AE and beyond. But this gives you a good idea. So if we're starting at the top, we're looking at your first floor or where your equipment is. If your equipment's in the basement, that's where your flood rate starts, is that first finished floor where your equipment is. All right? So if we start at 4 feet above base flood elevation, does everybody know what base flood elevation is? Yeah, okay, so this is relative to sea level, not to your ground level. So you'll actually have an elevation certificate that determines where your base flood elevation starts. Currently on 8th Avenue, our BFE is 8. Under the new maps, it should be 10. So you can calculate from there. So if you're 4 feet above your base flood elevation, you're gonna have the best rate. And obviously it goes down as you go, and you can see that the rates increase dramatically as you go down below that base flood elevation. Okay, so to put this into simpler terms, on the top we're looking at this group rate, so it's normalized across our community. So no matter where you are in that base flood elevation, whether you're above, you're below, or you're way below, it's a normalized rate. This is what has made the flood insurance very affordable for everybody in our community. If we take that away and we look at actuarial rates, it's basically every man for himself. And you can see how those rates are going to skyrocket depending on where your base flood elevation is. Though I don't think we have anybody that is 10 feet below BFE in Belmar, though we might, I don't want to say for sure. You know, we're looking at right now preferred rates, I believe in like $600 to $900 per year. If that starts going up over 1,000, over 10,000, I know a lot of people in our community, especially in the older folks that have maybe a fixed income, but that just makes it completely unaffordable. They're not going to be able to live here anymore. This is going to change the fabric of our community and who is actually allowed to live in Belmar and who can afford it. Anybody in here want $25,000 a year in flood insurance? No? Okay. Okay, so what does our risk look like? So we want to start looking at projections and what we're going to be dealing with in the future. So we're going to look at our current state. Again, this is not just a coastal problem. There were 36 flood disasters across 23 states in 2018. I don't have the 2019 numbers yet, but you can see how this is continually to increase. Back in 2016, there was only 26 flood disasters across 19 states. This is a growing problem. We have people along the Mississippi right now who are underwater. This is continually happening. All right, so here's Belmar. So by 2100, we are poised to lose more than 600 homes due to chronic inundation. And this is not from a storm. This is just from tidal flooding. Could be sunny day flooding. This could be rain. This could be any number of things. If you'd like to make note of the resource, Union of Concerned Scientists put out a report called Underwater, Rising Seas and Chronic Floods. You can plug in your address, you can plug in a zip code, you can look at anywhere in the entire country to see what that risk is. But if we start to look at it, we're talking about 931 people, and we're talking almost $5 million in tax income for Belmar. That's going to be a big hit. So we can look at this and say that by 2100, if we do nothing, we have to accept that we're in the last 80 years of Belmar. And we've had a good run. But I think you'd probably all agree, you're all here, you're interested, and so we should probably try to do something. If we look at our neighborhoods, we're looking at a significant impact with just a 1-degree rise in global temperature, and the seas that rise with that, and impacts could be felt as soon as 2030 in the K Street neighborhood. So you can see where this first starts to impact. And you're thinking, okay, well, it's K Street, right? Moderate neighborhood, fair enough. With just a 0.5 degree rise, we start losing some of our most valuable real estate and property tax dollars along Inlet Terrace. So these scenarios assume that global carbon emissions rise through the middle of the century and begin to decline. Not likely. So, again, these were very modest observations. You can look at, if you go onto this, there's a couple different tools and resources you can look at. You can look at things that are high as a 4-degree rise. You can look at, anything that you want to consider, but with just the most modest change, we start losing Inlet Terrace. Okay, so what can we do? Recognize this? This was Silver Lake when it was like all of Belmar. So we have a couple of things. There's some legislation called the NFIP RE, short for reauthorization. This is going to provide a lot of changes to the flood insurance program where it really levels the playing field, and I'm going to talk about ways that it's going to do that. Renewable energy. So again, we reduce that increase in global temperature, and community leadership and science-based solutions. This is what we have currently for legislation. There's 3 moving parts, all connected. We have the bigger waters and the Mendez-Grimm. Those are previous legislations from 2012 and 2014. And we have current congressional action. There's competing House bills, again, the Waters bill, and then we have this NFIP RE, which is in the Senate. And we'll talk about that and the bipartisan support for those bills. And then we're going to talk about those FEMA administrative changes. Okay, so under the Waters bill, it does nothing to roll back the steep increases. So they're looking to have increases of 18 to 25% in your premium per year. So very quickly, that's going to become unaffordable for a lot of people. So while there is some funding for mitigation, so this is an interesting thing. In your flood insurance policy, you have something that's called ICC. It's your increased cost of compliance. It's something you pay for. And what that means is that if your house and your first floor is below your base flood elevation, should you get wiped out in a storm, it gives you extra money to rebuild and get you above that base flood elevation. It gets you out of danger. The problem is that currently ICC is only available to you after you've lost everything. And we know that for every $1 that we spend on mitigation, you save $6 in recovery. So it just makes sense to get people out of the way before the storm. NFIP RE, so that's going to be the Senate bill. That actually holds private insurance companies accountable for what they put storm survivors through with falsified engineering reports and systemic underpayment. This is something I went through myself. Completely fraudulent engineering reports. They paid 10% of my claim initially. There was nothing we could do with $29,000 to rebuild our home. It just wasn't possible. And we knew it was wrong. And what were we to do? Who's going to listen? We appealed to the insurance company. They don't care. I even went to my banks. The house is going to be worthless unless we get this straightened out. They didn't care. All right? So banks don't care. Insurance companies don't care. So it's up to us. Okay, so it applies lessons learned from storm survivors so others don't have to suffer, and tax funding isn't wasted. The Waters bill does not actually provide those protections. We, being this group that I created this presentation for, do support the NFIP RE, which has been reintroduced in the House and Senate. and it add reforms to prevent FEMA from making administrative changes that price us out of our homes. NFIP, you can see, has bipartisan support across the board. There's a lot of people who are in there that do support this bill, and we need to make sure that this is what happens so that we can have good and proper flood insurance that, again, work for the taxpayers and the policy holders, not for the big banks, not for the big insurance companies that are just getting rich. Okay, what else does NFIP read to? It provides accurate, publicly available flood maps. So under the current FEMA administrative changes, these flood maps are not going to be available publicly. They're available to insurance companies. What does that allow them to do? They can go in and cherry pick out the best properties that they want to cover, the ones with the least risk, and leave out the ones that have higher risk. It also caps premium increases to 9% as opposed to 18 to 25%. Funds mitigation comprehensively. This means that you get your mitigation funding before you lose everything. You can actually get out of the way of the storm. You can elevate your home. You can move your equipment up. You would actually have the money to do that before. It also increases right your own fairness and accountability. So this is an interesting thing. So I found out when I had to sue my flood insurance company that I had to pay my own legal fees. I had to promise a third of my settlement to lawyers to get what was mine. Now, my insurance company's lawyers, however, were being reimbursed by FEMA and NFIP. So they had no skin in the game. So as a taxpayer and a policyholder, I was paying for attorneys on both sides of the table. I was paying for the ones fighting for me, and I was paying for the ones fighting against me. And that's not a fair system. So this legislation will help right that wrong. So again, that's actually number 2. So it institutes the fee shifting. So were there a lawsuit that you're entitled to actually receive your attorney fees back? You're not on the hook for those. And interesting, the insurance companies, were they to fight it, would have to pay their own legal fees. Creates regional coordinator to provide technical assistance for small communities, that's us, to effectively participate in the community rating system, which I understand that we are doing, and we are actually making improvements to that as we speak, and I'm really, really happy about that. And there's actually some more good news coming. It actually helps us also create more accurate flood maps using LiDAR. So instead of radar, right? Everybody understand LiDAR, it's using light. Okay, so ICC increases, you currently have 30,000 in your flood insurance policy. That number would go up to 60,000 under this new legislation. We talked about this, that you're actually able to get the funds before you lose everything, so you can actually mitigate and not just recover using the funds. And it also puts $1 billion per year in mitigation, prioritizes those most at risk to repeat flooding, and saves you from being priced out. Okay, so reducing the impact of sea level rise. So we have a few things here. Obviously, clean energy, offshore wind, living shorelines are all things that would help protect our community, and we should be investigating. But the one that is most interesting is actually a new bill in the House, and this has been brought up by Andy Kim, and then there's some other legislators as well that are supporting this, and that is the Resilient Highways Act. So if we start to see this chronic flooding, this chronic inundation, and we start losing access through Route 35 because it's constantly flooded, obviously that has impact on our communities. It's inconvenient to us, right? But then potentially it's also inconvenient to people who would want to visit Belmar if we don't have Route 35 open because it just happens to be flooded. And it floods more and more often. So, Resilient Highways Act is very positive. This is something that is relatively new. So Representative Andy Kim David Rouser out of North Carolina, and Finknauer out of Iowa. This allows the state DOT to use federal highway funding to tackle threats posed to storms by storms, flooding, and natural disasters. So what it does is it takes 15% of that allocated funding and allows states to use this on mitigating for highways. So it involves raising and relocating roadways out of flood-prone areas, constructing drainage structures, and using natural infrastructure to mitigate flood risk. So this basically helps with our Route 35 problem. And that is basically it. This is the House bill. If you'd like to write that down, there's a phone number if you want your congressperson to support it. And this is a list of resources.
Can you go back one?
Krista,
Yes.
is there anything mayor and council could do, like right now, to start working on this problem?
So I would say that Route 35 is a big concern. I think that, I would say that we're like behind the eight ball on Route 35. I think that this legislation that allows funding helps kind of solve that problem a bit. So now we know that there is a way forward to come up with a plan for Route 35, but we have got to get on that one like now. I mean, we think it's a state road building project.
Right.
Krista, we've already met with DOT
Perfect.
2 months ago. They have a plan in place within a couple of years. They want to address that, so we're basically meeting with the state on that.
And do we know what that looks like?
I'm sorry?
What does that look like?
They want to do some type of road diet and elevation so they stop flooding with drains and infrastructure changes.
When will we get to see that?
We started to talk about it 2 months ago, so we're still waiting for another meeting.
And do they have like an estimated timeline for when that would be
The state,
started or done?
no, the state doesn't give us any.
I mean, TikTok, I mean, we got 10 years or less to like get this done, and we all know road projects take forever.
But we've already had a productive meeting already.
Good, excellent.
I've read that some towns down in Ocean County in particular have been passing resolutions advocating for the passage of NFIP rate.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's something we could try to?
As a borough, that would be very positive for us to help support that
actually has
legislation.
influence in Washington?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Communities are signing on to support this and encouraging. Now, obviously, we have, our congresspeople are aware of this problem and have actually written the bills. But it is a very positive support to have communities signing on to support that legislation. It's obviously very positive for us versus the alternative. If we just leave it to FEMA and NFIP, who knows, insurance companies get richer. Yes.
Krista, what criteria are used under this bill to determine whether you're bought out or whether you would get the money to mitigate prior to?
So you're not going to get bought out. You're talking about a Blue Acres program.
I thought I saw that on the last bullet one.
Yeah, so that would, you have to agree as a group. So Belmar as a group would have to say, or a big chunk of Belmar would have to say, we all agree to sell. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, Blue Acres is tough. All you need is one.
If one person says no, that's it.
Yeah.
The whole neighborhood can't do it.
Yeah, yeah, they won't pick and choose. It has to go as a group. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Krista.
We have Bob Allison State, our auditor. There was just one more thing that we wanted to bring up because we had questions on the bonding, so if you can just explain our bonding at the end of the year, because we had a file that showed 58 million in bonding, which it wasn't, and I wanted Bob to explain why it wasn't.
Okay. At the end of the year, there's a statement that needs to be prepared called the annual debt statement. And in that annual debt statement, it shows that the gross debt of the town was $57 million. That was reduced by $25 million because of the utility being self-liquidating, means that it does have enough money to pay its debt. So that brings the debt down to 30. However, in that 30 million is $13 million of short-term debt, which was paid off this month. If you remember from last year's discussion, all of our debt was temporary. That means it gets rolled over from year to year, and only has a one-year life. We needed to permanently bond that. Since we permanently bonded it in December, we had to take down enough money to pay off the ban, they call it. And so 2 months later, we paid off $13 million. So our 30 million is down now to down 18. So our debt actually that's not covered by utility is only $18 million.
But the total debt went from 36 to 31, correct? It was 36 million when we started last year, we went to 31.
Right, because of our pay down.
And that was for all the hard work from our professionals, so I do appreciate that. All right,
Okay.
thank you. Any of the council have questions on that? Okay, thanks, Bob. We did have our workshop, the engineer review of the redevelopment proposals, but we're going to do that next meeting. It's not quite prepared yet, so we're going to do that next meeting. All right. Anybody else have anything for workshops? All right. Anybody in the audience have petitions? All right, seeing none. April?
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 4th, 2020 meeting?
Motion.
Second.
Councilman Vaughn? Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Mayor Walsiger?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Abstain.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 9th, 2020 meeting?
Second.
Councilman Vaughn? Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Mayor Walsiger?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Okay. Any public comment on, oh no, we're going to go towards the council. Councilman Carvelli?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Past couple of weeks, so I was at the swearing in of the new chief and promotion of the 2 officers. Just want to wish you the best of luck in your new role. Congratulate you once again. Thank Mayor Kirschenbaum for orchestrating the whole thing. It was a great event. So thank you for that. I was also at the Harbor Commission meeting where we were discussing this year's boat show. This is going to be on April 4th and 5th. I'm hopeful that it's going to be in the water. I'm not sure what the discussion is on that, but that would be a great thing if we can get that to happen. Talked about a number of improvements around the marina, namely fences, awnings, and signage. We're putting together some proposals to send up to the borough administrator and the council. One thing that we did actually make a motion on was to build some additional kayak racks because we have a pretty long waiting list for people that want to rent those spots. So I'm not sure if that made it to you yet, but one thing that we talked about. We also talked about raising fuel prices this year. Seems that we are well below the other marinas in the area that sell fuel, and it's a great opportunity for us to have some income from the marina. And lastly, we talked about the shade structure. This isn't really a marina thing, but there's a shade structure going up, and Mike, can you just elaborate on what that is and where we are in getting that done?
Sure. The shade structure has actually been owned by Belmar for a number of years. Left in the boxes. It was right around Sandy time, right after it was purchased, and it just never got around to getting up. So it's still in good shape. It was a very good quality shade structure. So obviously the mayor and council, along with Mr. Kirschenbaum, wanted it to go up. This place was chosen for McCleary Park for a number of reasons, but again, there is no shade structure there for either the divers on the steps, for the people using the barbecues. Obviously, it can be rented out for whatever event, weddings, reunions, whatever. It's going to give people a place to meet and know that they have a structure to have their party events, whatever it is. So again, we're putting it up ourselves. We are just roofing it. We'll be back, hopefully getting the roof at the end of this week. And we still need to pour a concrete floor for it, and then we should be good to go. We're still discussing whether we're going to put up railings on the sides or not. I believe we are, but that's where we're heading.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think it's a great feature, and I'm glad that we were able to find a good use for it. So thank you for that. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you. Councilman Craig.
Oftentimes, we sit up here on this dais and get bad news, particularly when it comes to the physical management of Belmar. But I also had an opportunity to attend the police chief and Sergeant Yee and Patrolman Groom's swearing in on February 9th, and I can't begin to tell you how proud it made me feel as a resident of Belmar and a Belmartian. Borough administrator put on a very nice ceremony that day honoring the hard work that those folks do every day to protect us and keep our community crime-free and work as a community, and all the community policing efforts that you're doing, which are working so well. So I just want to also congratulate our chief and her team. And we look forward to your new reign as police chief here in Belmar. I was excited to hear Councilman Carvelli talk about adding more kayak racks in the marina, because I've been getting contacted by people who are on that waiting list there. But I also had a meeting last week with a boat owner who moved out of the marina over to Neptune Township because he uses his boat primarily for recreational purposes. You know, getting off of work on Saturday, going there at 4 o'clock and going out either to fish or do a pleasure cruise with family. And he just found it to be aggravating because he'd invite his friends to come down on Saturday afternoons, meet me at the marina at 4 o'clock, and no one had a place to park. So, you know, he moved his boat to a place where people could go and park and he could use it for those purposes. And, you know, I know we've talked about this in the past and we've all been aware of parking shortage over there, but I think it's just important as a council to be aware that these are challenges that some people are facing as we look at redevelopment and plans that are brought to the town. We take parking into consideration, not only throughout the town, but certainly for people who want to pay for a slip over in the marina or come down for a day and go out on a kayak or rent a boat from the marina or whatnot, to be able to have a place to be able to enjoy those recreational activities. The Shade Tree Commission meeting is tomorrow night. It was moved 6 o'clock at the Belmar Library. That group is becoming very active. They've developed a brochure to educate the community regarding the Shade Tree program here in Belmar that they are hoping to go out not as an additional mailing, but including in one of the borough-wide mailings, so there's no additional fee for that, to educate the residents about the great benefits of that program. And that commission is also putting together an Arbor Day education program for the kids in the schools you have in Belmar as well. And the last part of my report, I bring it up now, maybe it's part of another part of this agenda, is unless there's a special meeting, I think this is the last meeting we have before parade day this year, because it's early. So essentially, you have our borough administrator, our DPW director, borough administrator, maybe mayor, just some part during this meeting to give us all a quick update as to the parade day and any preparations they've made, and if there's anything different we should expect this year, or things or stats for
Chief, you want to update us?
We're working, as my first, second official, special event. Everything's in order. We've met with the surrounding towns and agencies that assist us on that day, last week. We're just working on the schedule, making sure that the security of the parade is our #1 priority, and working with DPW on setting that up.
Thank you. Mike, you want to add anything to that?
We've been in contact with the county to bring in down 2 sweepers, as they're always kind enough to let us do that. Bradley Beach is giving us a loader and a sweeper. We will have 2 sweepers. We're borrowing one from people we're looking to purchase one off of for this year. And Avon is also giving us some heavy equipment. Other than that, we have been doing all of our due diligence, getting ready. We're borrowing some extra barricades. We're putting up the wood trash cans as the chief requests because of security things. So again, everything will be in order. We're going through everything now, getting it to go. Next week will be execution for 4 days of the week. We'll be getting everything ready, but we will be ready.
So when do we close off the streets? Or when is the earliest any street would be?
On parade day itself?
Yeah.
Main Street will be closed starting at between 6 and 8 with the concrete barricades.
Okay.
In order for the officers to get out on post and the area to be swept. And then we will be keeping 8th Avenue and 12th Avenue open, east and westbound, up until about 11:30.
Okay.
Maybe a little later, depending on how the traffic is flowing. But we usually try to close that down about 11:30. But it gives residents and visitors the option of getting on both sides of Main Street up until about 11:30.
Thank you. Councilwoman Wall.
I'm really sorry, this thing's not going away. I have nothing to report at this time. Our meetings will be coming up soon. I apologize. Excuse me.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have anything to add about the meeting swearing in on Sunday. They've already said it. I think we have the most outstanding police department. I really appreciate I know the kind of job our chief is going to do, and I really want to give a big shout out to Ed Kirschenbaum, because everything about that ceremony was Ed's planning, and it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen, honest to God. So there was an environmental commission meeting last week, but I really don't have anything to say about it because Chairman Lippincott basically said everything I was going to say. I want to thank the Environmental Commission for being here tonight. I want to thank Krista for her also uplifting presentation. But, you know, if you acknowledge the reality, then at least you can start to deal with it. And I think we are going to do what we can. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you. I just have a couple things. I also like to thank the Belmar School for allowing us to have the ceremony down there. And of course, I want to thank everybody that was involved. John Savia, Marshall, Eddie, DPW, Mike Campbell. They did an amazing job setting that all up, and congratulations, Chief. I know you're going to do a good job. The only other thing I have is, yeah, the parade's on track, and like the Chief said, I was involved with the parade for many years when I was a police officer. It starts way before this, back in November and December for the planning of it every year. But what is it, the 47th this year? 46th or 47th, yeah, it's one of those. But so, yeah, it's been in planning for a lot of years, so everything should go off without a hitch, hopefully. And then the week after, we have Dine and Discover. which John Sabia has been, I don't know if you've been watching our Facebook page, but he's been putting the videos out there, and it's really becoming a very popular event, so I want to thank John for that. And that's all I got. Hopefully we'll see everybody out there for the parade, and let's pray for good weather. All right, public session on any of the resolution items. Yeah. 2020-60 has been removed from the resolution. That's because it wasn't prepared correctly, and we're making some changes in it. All right, seeing none?
Can I have a motion to close the public session?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Could I have a motion to approve the resolutions as listed on the consent agenda?
Make a motion.
Second.
Councilman Vaughn? Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvel?
Yes.
Next, we have a consent agenda for ordinances. This is first reading and introduction only on ordinances 2009, 10, 11, and 12. I have a motion to offer them for first reading.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Councilman Vaughn? Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvel?
Yes.
Okay, public session. Anybody have anything? Yes. Hi, Mark.
In there? There, we're good. Mark Lettuce, 904-13,000. Maybe I'm a little late to this show, but today was the first day I didn't get my recycling picked up. And I know you guys have heard a lot of issues with it and a lot of concerns. And I just wanted to offer a simple suggestion that could really probably make it a lot easier on everyone, including people who have 50-gallon recycling containers. Simply removing the 50-gallon part from ordinance 23-5-1, you could still keep the 50-pound weight limit, and still everybody could keep their recycling containers and not have to deal with code enforcement knocking on people's doors to let them know that they have a container that's above the size. And the reason I think it's important is because DPW is already picking up their own 50-gallon containers. They use them on the beach, they use them at the parks. That's what they're using when they're collecting trash. So I don't see how a size limit is really effective as much as the weight limit is. And the selective enforcement is an issue because you're seeing people who aren't having lids on their containers still getting their recycling taken away. Yet if you have a container that's 50 gallons, yours isn't going to get taken away. And if you look closer at the ordinance, you'll see that the DPW is in fact violating their own ordinance in terms of having to have covers on the vehicles that are removing the trash and the garbage and the recycling, recycling. The bucket trucks they're using don't have any covers on them. So when they're driving down the street, sometimes you can see recyclables falling out of the top of them. I've seen it when they're going quickly on 16th Avenue. That's a violation of the ordinance. So I'm just saying, consider rewriting the ordinance to remove the 50-gallon limit. We have a lot of happy people in town. We don't have any more complaints about it. It would be really hard for me to make my recycling container weigh 50 pounds, even if it's 50 gallons.
I'm sure if it's all glass, it would be heavy. But,
If I filled it up with
I
water,
mean,
it might
the
do
ordinance
it,
is
so-
in place so that, you know, the DPW workers, we don't have people going out with injured backs or anything like that to make sure that it's not overweight. But we'll take a look at the ordinance. I'll talk to our DPW director.
I agree, I don't want to
Take a
see
look.
guys getting hurt, right? But the fact that they're already doing 50-gallon containers on the beach and at the parks, does it really matter the size? I mean, as long as they're keeping the weight restriction on there. That part doesn't change, so we're still saying you can't remove a container that's over 50 pounds.
Okay, we'll take a look at it and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Mark, why wasn't your recycling picked up today? Because I know it was supposed to be done. Was it because your container was larger?
My container's a 50-gallon container.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially that's it. But it's been picked up since January 1st, so this was the first day. So, thank you, I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Yes, in the back.
Hi, Francine Forte, 8th Avenue. I'd just like to know, I guess this is a question probably would be directed to the administrator. What is happening with the projector and the movies for the summer?
As everybody knows, the equipment was no good last year. It's about $20,000 to get a new projector, new screen, things of that nature. We're trying to balance our budget now. We're trying to see what funds we have available, but $20,000 is quite a large number. Last year, we had in place prior to everything breaking down, we had sponsors for this, about $7,000, because there's copyright that has to be done for the movies that we play. So we're still looking into it. We're looking at all our numbers.
Okay, because many organizations work on the nights of the movie nights and, sell popcorn and sodas and, little foods and treats. And those organizations, make a good sizable amount of money. So I was just wondering, they count on that a whole lot.
We're trying to see what we can do, but like I said, for $20,000
Yeah. Okay.
for 8 movies. We're looking into it. We're trying to.
Yeah, we're working on our budget, and as soon as the budget's
Thank you.
complete, we'll see if we have the money to buy it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes?
Rose DeGagnon, 201 9th Avenue. I was delighted to come down for breakfast and read the article in the paper this morning that the project is being looked at, the Seaport redevelopment. What you mentioned was traffic and parking, and I know they're an issue, but it's kind of appropriate that Krista was here tonight because I think the amount of building is going to affect our water tables, all of that environmentally. So when you're considering the 9th Avenue project and this other project, I think that you have to consider the environment, how much grass, drainage, and all of those things. So I hope you take that into consideration, that we don't become overdeveloped and overpopulated when you're looking at these projects. Okay, and that's the first thing I wanted to ask. And the second thing is beach badges. Have we made a decision on I know Point Pleasant or Seaside, I read something in the paper, their beach badges, adult badges start at 12. So are we anywhere on the beach badge prices?
As far as changing them for this year?
Yeah. Last year you said that you had to look at it and we might have a junior badge, but maybe that was illegal. But everybody up and down the shore is charging, we may not, but Bradley Beach, Seaside starts their adult badges at 12.
No, and we would be able to too, but according to state law, we'd have to charge full price for 12-year-olds, and, I'm not comfortable doing that. I know our beach director has been talking to us about moving it to 14 because the state law hasn't been passed yet to allow having a children's badge at a reduced rate. So.
But you're not comfortable with 12-year-olds?
Paying full price? Well, I mean, because all the other beaches are charging less, I think 12's a
This was
little young.
Seaside, so I know it's Ocean County.
Yeah,
But, again, now 20-year-olds are going on and saying they're,
I know.
so.
And that's the issue that we wanted to have. So Mr. Corey, our beach director, was looking at going to 14, so we'll be talking about that in the next couple of meetings.
Okay, thank you.
All right? Anyone else? Hello, Mrs. Fowler.
Good afternoon. Sharon Russell Fowler, 11th Avenue. I just have a question about the sidewalks. Took a walk last night with my dog, hit an area that was about a 2-inch lip, and took a nice spill. And I know at one point you've been talking about having all of the sidewalks leveled. They have to be within, I think, 1/2 of an inch, something like that. And I don't think anything's been done probably for the last 2 years regarding that. So, because I have the date on my sidewalk, so. But anyway, I just wanted to see if we were going to make sure that they're taking care of that, because it was something that the borough had suggested that we do, so.
Well, I know we listed everybody, and then they had the option of opting out and doing it themselves, so we're going to have to send code enforcement around to make sure those people that opted out are doing them.
Right.
So, what was the address, do you remember?
I do, but I won't say it online.
Good job.
Anyone else?
I took a picture.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, Maria Rontanaro, 1246 Pine Tree Way. I just had a question. I didn't realize that Movies on the Beach was not going to happen. I was told in November after the election that that was something that was definitely coming back. And so this is the first time I'm hearing that it may not.
Well, we're trying, we got to get through our budget first. As soon as we get through the budget, we'll see if we have the extra money to buy it. But yeah, I actually really want to get it done, so.
Yeah,
We'll work on it.
that's important to our community. It's important to our
Yeah.
children. It's important to those fundraising, groups that we have that are so important to Belmar. Additionally, I'd just like to put in my 2 cents about charging for children on the beach. If we want to be a family town, which I believe we are, I think that it would be awful to charge for children. I don't see, is there something illegal in asking for identification or at least a, show of what your age is? Is that illegal?
Yeah, because, they'll say, well, we don't carry ID coming to the beach, and so you just never know.
So you
I mean, Mr. Brennan used to work on the beach, so he knows the issues.
Heard a million stories. Oh, my mom just dropped me off. Oh, I don't
Right.
have anything. I've talked to Beach Director Corey at length about this because I feel the same way you do. But honestly, if you're looking at 14 and 15-year-olds, they're all in high school. And I think as the students in high school and they're old enough to get working papers and they can do all that, then I don't think it's inappropriate to ask them to pay to be at the beach. And those are the ages where the real difficulty lies. It's really, it's a lot harder for a 13-year-old to look like a 17-year-old, or a 17-year-old to look like a 13-year-old than it is for a 17-year-old to look like a 15-year-old, you know what I mean? So I think this might actually solve that problem while still not affecting families so much, because one of the things I also noticed working at the beach was 14 and 15-year-olds will come down in groups. If they live in town, they'll walk or ride their bikes. If they're not from town, the same thing. That you'll see the mom drive 5 or 6 kids off, and then off they go with no adult supervision. And I don't think it's appropriate for Belmar to be like a free babysitting service for people who, for one reason or another, want to get their kids out of the house. I mean, again, I think it's really not inappropriate for 14 to 15-year-olds to be paying to get on the beach.
Okay, well, I'll tell my daughter that when she turns 14, that she's gonna have to pay for the beach that we live in, that we pay taxes for, much more taxes than we did last year. To me, that feels unacceptable. And also, if we're getting $6,000 for the ATM machines, maybe we can put that all together and get our movies on the beach back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, April.
We have a motion to close the public session. All in favor?
Aye.
Next we have Resolution 2020-72. This is a resolution authorizing executive session, whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas there is adequate notice to the public of this meeting, and whereas the Borough Council is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, now therefore be it resolved by the Borough Council as follows: the public shall be excluded from discussion and action upon the hereinafter specified subject matter. The general nature of the subject matter to be discussed is pending contract negotiations. Minutes will be kept of the closed session. It is anticipated at this time that the above subject matter will be made public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. This resolution shall take effect immediately.